Good afternoon, dear friends. We are glad to welcome you here in Ukraine Media Center today, and I'd like to remind you that we have been supported by the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. I would like to thank this Skyloft Hotel for having us here, providing premises for us, and I'd like to remind all journalists that we work here for you. Here on this location, you'll be able to get comments from our speakers. You can work here. We have Wi-Fi connection, tea, coffee, whatever you need for your productive work. And today, we have planned two briefings in our media center. Right now, we are to start the first one. I would like to introduce our guest. We will provide clarifications about mobilization during the martial law rule. And our speaker today is Roman Horbach, Head of Personnel Department of the Staff of Land Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. After that, in 1 hour, we will have the second briefing here, and that one will be about the operations of the state emergency services at the time of this war and aggressions from Russian Federation. It will be held by Gennady Gerasimchuk, Colonel of the State Emergency Service. If you wish, you are welcome to join that other briefing too. And now I'd like to give the floor to Roman Horbach. Roman, you're welcome. Please tell us about mobilization during the martial law rule. Thank you. I'd like to welcome all of you. And before starting discussion of mobilization, I'd like to remind you that on February 24th, the Russian Federation launched an open aggression against Ukraine. This bloodshed in the center of Europe has been the beginning of a large-scale war. So the President of Ukraine announced the general mobilization of Ukraine with his presidential decree, and I'd like to remind you that defending the country is a constitutional duty of each and every citizen, because the defense of the country, of the nation, is one of the most important responsibilities of the state, and that's the duty for the whole people. The Constitution of Ukraine states that defense of Ukraine is independence and territorial integrity, and respect for its state symbols is a duty of each citizen. And these duties are also repeatedly stated in other laws of Ukraine. And to comply with the law of Ukraine, namely the law on defense, on the mandatory military duty and military service, is a constitutional duty of each and every citizen, and everybody has to make their contribution towards keeping the territorial integrity of our country and peaceful life of our people. We have to remember that if we manage to keep our state now, we keep it not only for ourselves, but also for our children and grandchildren. So now I'll try and answer briefly some most relevant questions raised in mass media. First of all, what is mobilization? Mobilization is a set of measures implemented in order to switch the national economy and other components of the nation, as well as its military units of the armed forces and other components of the defense sector, in a planned way to the military staff schedule. So in a planned way, in a planned manner, the nation is switching towards a wartime operation. What is military reserve? This question was also asked. The military reserve is a component of the armed forces of Ukraine or other military components which has reservists and is the basis for staffing units and subunits. And now we have time when we have started using this military reserve. What is the drafting of conscripts during mobilization? That's about studying the documents, doing medical examinations if those were not carried before, and drafting as such when conscripts are drafted and sent to military units, reservists and conscripts. Now about the process, how the mobilization is taking place. As I already said, because of the military of the aggression, the President of Ukraine declared general mobilization by its order, and it's to be carried out within 90 days. So we can be drafting those conscripts and reservists during 90 days, but then they will continue their military service as long as it's needed to defend against the armed aggression. drafting of reservists and equipment from the national economy is done under the procedure established by the national law in accordance with mobilization plans, and then those people and equipment are sent to designated military units as stipulated in those mobilization plans. Who is to be mobilized, first of all? And are people immediately sent to the front lines? How are those people trained if they have no previous military experience? I will start by saying that, first of all, staffing of those combat units was done using reservists of the so-called first order operational reserve and those reservists who signed contracts for military service and military reserve. So first of all, we mobilized this category of people, of personnel, and then gradually increasing the numbers of military personnel. We have been mobilizing also other conscripts, and they are sent, if they previously had some military experience, some military professions recorded, then they can be sent directly to military unit. If, on the other hand, they have no such experience, then there is a mandatory training for them. They are sent to the training centers of the armed forces of Ukraine. Those mobilized people who never had experience of military service before, and we also have such people, are definitely sent to the training centers. There are many questions about the procedure of mobilization for those internally displaced persons. Well, because of active hostilities, military operations, combat actions, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian citizens, especially those from the eastern part of Ukraine, those subject to mobilization, aged 18 to 60, they left their residences, their locations, and moved to other areas of Ukraine, to the western Ukraine. In this case, males who have to be drafted have to come and submit themselves for to be recorded as at military commissioners' offices at their actual locations, and they can be drafted if there is a need to draft people with their military profession, and they will be drafted to a particular military unit. So after they have been recorded in military officers, then they're drafted and mobilized under the general procedure. Also, there is a question about how those mobilized people are distributed across regions. Well, I have to say that there is no such thing in Ukrainian legislation as distribution across regions. The only thing that legislation says is that military units have to be staffed by those nearest plans for the nearest future.